we're diving into some pretty heavy stuff today.
Yeah.
Prompted by that horrific school shooting in South Carolina.
Yeah.
A 12-year-old taking another child's life.
Mm.
It's hard to even process.
It's really hard.
It makes you wonder, like, why do these things keep happening? Even when parents try their best to raise good kids, how can something like this happen?
You know, it's a question that has haunted humanity for ages. And the source we're looking at today tackles it head on through a biblical lens.
Right. And it uses this specific tragedy as a jumping off point to explore some even bigger questions about human nature and sin and ultimately grace.
Yeah, the source starts by hitting us with this really stark quote from Jeremiah 17:9.
Okay.
The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? It's not exactly a warm and fuzzy welcome, Matt.
Yikes. No kidding. But I guess that's the point, right? No sugarcoating.
Right.
What's the source trying to get at with this verse?
It's laying the foundation for how the Bible views human nature. We're not just good or bad, black or white. We're capable of both incredible love and horrifying evil.
Okay.
It's this inherent tension that makes us human.
So even with good intentions and a good upbringing, there's this potential for darkness within us.
Exactly. And the source makes it clear that we can't afford to ignore that darkness. The fact that this child was raised in a Christian home, that's what makes this case so unsettling.
Right.
It shatters the illusion that we can somehow control or predict human behavior, even when it comes to our own kids.
It's like this kid's story throws a wrench into that whole good parenting equals good kids equation.
Exactly.
So what's the alternative? If we can't engineer perfect humans, then what?
Well, the source uses this really vivid analogy to explain the unpredictability of sin. Fermentation.
Okay.
You think you have harmless grape juice, but suddenly, bam, you've got potent, even dangerous wine.
Oh, wow.
Sin can work the same way, festering and growing in the human heart in ways we don't always see coming.
That's a pretty powerful image. But if we can't always see it coming, what are we supposed to do? Just sit around and wait for the metaphorical wine to explode?
Of course not. But the source isn't about offering easy answers or quick fixes.
Okay.
It's about acknowledging the complexity of human nature and the fact that we can't do this alone.
Yeah.
That's where the need for grace comes in.
All right.
This South Carolina tragedy, it's a stark reminder that we're all in desperate need of divine intervention.
Okay, hold on. Divine intervention. Doesn't that kind of contradict the whole free will thing?
Yeah.
If God's calling the shots, where do our choices fit in?
That tension between free will and God's sovereignty, that's at the heart of the human experience.
Right.
But the source seems to be saying that this tragedy isn't about pointing fingers. Mm-hmm. It's about recognizing our own limitations. Mm-hmm. It uses this interesting term, our inherent earthiness.
Earthiness? You mean like literally being made of dirt?
Well, there's that, but it's more about acknowledging our flawed and finite nature.
Okay.
We're not gods. We mess up.
Yeah.
We make bad choices. We're dependent on something greater than ourselves for transformation.
So how does this earthiness play into all of this?
Yeah.
How does admitting we need help change things?
Well, for starters, it changes how we approach issues like parenting.
Okay.
The source points out that we tend to see our kids through rose-colored glasses, forgetting that they're just as susceptible to brokenness as the rest of us.
You're saying we have unrealistic expectations, that we expect our kids to be somehow immune to all the stuff we struggle with.
It's like we're surprised when they turn out to be well human.
Yeah.
We forget, as the source puts it, that we're all made of dust.
Okay.
We're all inherently flawed and in need of grace.
That dust metaphor is pretty heavy. A stark reminder of our limitations, right?
Yeah.
But what about this divine intervention thing? Where does that fit in with all this talk about human flaws?
Well, the source contrasts our dustiness with another side of our nature, the living spirit.
Okay.
It's this idea that we're not just flawed beings.
Right.
We have the potential for something more.
So we're like this weird mix of dirt and spirit. What are we supposed to do with that?
That's the million-dollar question. And the source seems to suggest that it's through acknowledging our need for God, for His grace and mercy, that we can begin to bridge that gap between our limitations and our potential.
So it's not about denying our flaws, but about recognizing them and then turning to something bigger than ourselves for help.
Exactly. And the source makes it clear that we can't overcome our brokenness on our own.
Right.
We need something more.
So we're these walking contradictions, dust aindy spirit, capable of great things, but also prone to messing up. And this school shooting, it almost feels like a microcosm of that whole struggle.
That's a really insightful observation. The source doesn't shy away from the horror of what happened, but it also pushes us to see it through this lens of grace and mercy.
It would be easy to just sink into despair, right? If a kid raised in a church can commit such a horrific act, then what hope is there for the rest of us? But the source seems to be nudging us towards something beyond that despair.
Absolutely. It's not about minimizing the tragedy or excusing the shooter's actions. It's about recognizing the pervasive nature of sin and our desperate need for God's transforming power in our lives.
I remember this line from the source that really struck me. It talks about how we often view our children through rose-colored glasses, forgetting that even with the best upbringing, they're still subject to the same brokenness as all of us.
That's such a crucial point. We often place these unrealistic expectations on our children, expecting them to somehow be immune to the temptations and struggles that we ourselves face.
It's like we forget they're human too. Flawed and messy, just like us.
Exactly. We forget that we're all made of dust, as the source puts it. And that dust, that earthiness, it's a part of who we are.
It's almost like this shooting forces us to confront that reality head on. It shatters any illusions we might have had about being able to control or perfect human nature.
And in a way, that confrontation can be a catalyst for growth, both individually and as a society. It forces us to look in the mirror and acknowledge some uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our world.
So it's not about finding easy answers or placing blame. It's more about using these difficult moments as opportunities to examine our own hearts and seek guidance from something beyond ourselves.
Precisely. It's about recognizing our limitations and acknowledging our need for something more. That's where this idea of earthiness comes back into play. It's about being honest about our humanness, about our capacity for both good and evil.
So we can't just focus on fixing the world out there. We have to start by looking inward and acknowledging our own brokenness.
That's such an important point. If we approach these issues with a sense of self-righteousness, thinking we have all the answers, we're likely to do more harm than good. But if we approach them with humility, recognizing our own need for grace, then we open ourselves up to solutions that are both just and compassionate.
That makes a lot of sense. So, practically speaking, what does it look like to live out this earthiness in a way that honors both our limitations and our potential? How do we balance those two things?
Well, I think the source offers us a few clues. It encourages us to see these tragedies not as isolated incidents, but as opportunities for growth and reflection. It challenges us to move beyond simplistic solutions and engage with the complexities of human nature in all its messiness.
It's like instead of asking, how could this happen? We should be asking, what can we learn from this? How can we move forward in a way that acknowledges both our brokenness and our potential for healing and transformation?
Exactly. It's a call to move beyond judgment and toward understanding.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that we're all in this together and that we need each other's support and compassion as we navigate the challenges of being human.
And that circles back to the idea of earthiness and our dependence on something greater than ourselves. Mm-hmm. If we're truly going to create a better world, we need to start by humbly acknowledging our own limitations.
The source uses that analogy of fermentation to describe how sin can grow and fester within us. So the question becomes, how do we prevent that fermentation from turning toxic? How do we cultivate a culture of grace and accountability that allows us to confront our flaws without shame and seek support when we need it?
It's like we need to create spaces where it's safe to be both dust and spirit, where we can acknowledge our brokenness and also celebrate our potential for growth and transformation.
I love that image. It suggests that real lasting change doesn't happen through condemnation or judgment, but through love, understanding, and a willingness to journey alongside each other in our shared humanity.
This has been such a thought-provoking conversation. It's really shifted my perspective on how I view myself, my relationships, and the world around me. It's a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope.
And that hope is rooted in the recognition that we're not alone in this. We have each other, we have God, we have this incredible capacity for love and compassion that can transform even the most broken parts of ourselves and our world.
That's a beautiful thought. Mm-hmm. So where do we go from here? How do we take all of this and actually apply it to our lives? What does it look like to embrace this earthiness in a practical way?
Well, I think it starts with recognizing that we're not in control. You know, right. We can't force our children or anyone else to be perfect.
Right.
We can't engineer a world without pain or suffering. But we can create environments where grace and forgiveness are abundant, where mistakes are seen as opportunities for learning, and where we support each other in this messy, beautiful journey of becoming more fully human.
I think that's a perfect place to start. We have to let go of this illusion of control and embrace the reality of our limitations.
Yeah.
It's like we can't just throw up our hands and say, well, human nature is flawed, so what can you do?
Yeah.
But we also can't pretend that we have all the answers or that we can fix everything through sheer human effort.
Right. It's a delicate balance, and the source doesn't pretend it's easy. But it does offer us a way forward. It reminds us that even in the face of tragedies like this school shooting, there's still hope.
So it's not about ignoring the darkness or pretending it doesn't exist, but recognizing that we need something beyond ourselves to overcome it.
Exactly. And that's where faith comes in. It allows us to hold on to hope even in the face of tragedy. It reminds us that we're not alone in this struggle. There's a power greater than ourselves at work, and even in the darkest of times, redemption is possible.
It's about recognizing those two sides within ourselves, right? The dust and the spirit, embracing our limitations, but also tapping into that potential for something more.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's in acknowledging our limitations and leaning into our need for God that we can begin to address the complexities of human nature and work towards a better world.
This has been such a powerful conversation. It's given me so much to think about, not just in terms of this specific tragedy, but in terms of how I view myself, my relationships, and the world around me.
It's a reminder that even when things seem hopeless, there's always grace. There's always a chance to start again. And that's a powerful message to carry with us.
It really is.
Yeah.
So for anyone listening who's wrestling with these same questions, what would be your advice? Where do we go from here?
I'd say embrace your own earthiness. Don't shy away from your flaws and limitations. Acknowledge them, own them, and then turn to something bigger than yourself for help in overcoming them. And remember, you're not alone in this journey. We all need each other.
That's such a great reminder. We're all in this together, dust and spirit flaws and all. And maybe that's the key to creating a world where tragedies like this one become less and less frequent.
I think you're right. It's in embracing our shared humanity and all its complexities that we find hope for the future.
This has been an incredible deep dive.
Huh.
A lot to process, a lot to think about. But ultimately, I think it's left us with a message of hope. We may be flawed, we may be dust, but we're also capable of incredible things. And with a little grace and a lot of humility, we can make the world a better place. Thanks for joining us on this journey, and we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.